Today's episode is sponsored by Zola. A different kind of advertising experience built with wedding pros and for wedding pros is here and growing fast. Your couples already love Zola, so stay tuned to find out why you'll love them too. Hey everybody, it's Andy Kushner with The Wedding Biz. Well, I did it. I had the big night and I performed my 5-minute stand-up routine at the Comedy Club in Washington, D.C., the major one. And for the past 2 months in the introductions for the show, as you know, I've been talking about the process of wanting to re-energize myself and my creativity and how I had signed up for a stand-up comedy class, which culminated in this performance that I just did 2 nights ago. And it was so exhilarating. And it's been an absolutely incredible journey from working on writing it to how I was going to deliver it, all of that. I just loved feeling just totally consumed, which I was, which reminded me of like when I first discovered music or when I first started podcasting. I mean, I need these big bursts of creative energy and it fuels me and everything else in my life. And I know from the hundreds of interviews that I've done that we all have these peaks and valleys in both our businesses and our creative lives. And we all have different ways to inspire ourselves as well as to ground ourselves. And I suggest from this recent experience to occasionally make it big, like really challenge yourself. The payoffs are amazing. I'm just on such a high right now. Well, anyway, if you missed last week's episode, there was no episode because of the holiday, so you didn't miss anything. Today's episode is a revisit of my original interview of Laurie Arons from April of 2019. Since founding Laurie Arons Special Events in 1994, she has been featured in numerous magazine publications and has been listed in Vogue, Harper's Bazaar, and Martha Stewart Weddings as one of the top planners worldwide. Her clients include noteworthy trendsetters like Sofia Coppola, Vanessa Gaddy, and Christy Turlington, and prominent business moguls like Gary Friedman and Frank Caulfield. Laurie also runs a very popular wedding planner masterclass, which I was fortunate enough to be involved in with the one late last year in Montana. So I know from personal experience how great it is. Oh, and by the way, near the end, she talks about her masterclass, and we recorded that conversation just before it occurred. And so it's going to sound as if it's about to happen, but it's already passed. And you can go to theweddingbiz.com and search for several other interviews of Laurie on the show. They're all stellar. Enjoy this conversation with Laurie Arons. Laurie, it is so good to have you on the show today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Andy. I'm excited.
Yeah, this is going to be really fun. So, you know, it's interesting, Laurie. So many people suggested that I interview you. I mean, honest to God, there were like 4 or 5 people. You got to get Laurie. You got to get Laurie. And so I'm so happy that you're here. So, you know, it's interesting. I know that you are listed in the listings of top planners in 3 major publications in the fairly recent past: Vogue, Harper, Bazaar, and Martha Stewart Weddings. That's amazing. Like, how do you feel about getting that kind of recognition?
It's truly an honor, and, you know, it shows that our hard work is being recognized, which is so, so rewarding.
Well, was there something, you know, like about your childhood that you think helped shape who you are today, you know, both with your career and personality? I mean, was there some kind of experience or experiences you had growing up that, you know, first gave you the taste for this kind of industry?
Yeah, if I look back at my childhood, I grew up with a family of 4 children, and I was the oldest girl. I had a brother a year older than me, a sister a year younger than me, and a little brother 2 years younger than me. So we were all very close in age, and it was quite active in my household. So, and both of my parents were professional working parents. My mom had a very powerful career she was a doctor and running different hospitals and, you know, running all over the state, meeting with different legislators. So, you know, I was kind of the oldest girl at home, and I fancied myself as the caregiver of my family, and I learned how to cook, and my mom was an amazing cook, but she wasn't around much. So we had somebody living with her family that cooked because my mom, during the week, because my mom was working so much, and my dad also had a busy career as a physician. So I would go to the grocery market with the people that took care of us, and I would help pick everything and design the menus, and I would cook snacks after school, and I would cook dinner as much as possible and Sunday breakfast, and I would cook Thanksgiving dinner. My mom taught me how to cook Thanksgiving dinner when I was 8 years old.
Oh my God.
And so I made everything from scratch. And while we are technically Jewish, we had family dinner on Christmas, and my dad loved turkey so much that I would basically make Thanksgiving dinner twice a year, once on Christmas Day and once on Thanksgiving. And made homemade bread, homemade everything. So I really have this love of giving to people and, making people happy. And I love food and the ritual of sitting down with people that you care about or you find interesting or you love, and, tasting different foods from all over the world. And I love just the whole process of eating.
But you know what else I'm picking up on, Laurie, is that I'm also thinking that as a child, and especially being a little girl, the role model that you have, one of the benefits, I believe, of your mother, being empowered and having the kind of career that she had is that I would think that it showed you, because, we're still obviously in society at this point where it's changing over now. I love what's going on with empowerment of women, generally speaking. But back then when we were growing up, it wasn't quite there yet. And totally, it was starting. And for you to see your mother going out there and having a career, I would think that also maybe subconsciously told you, I can do this. I can be an entrepreneur. I can really go for it.
100%. Yeah, it was quite inspiring. While she wasn't really one of the moms that I may have loved as well, my friends' moms who were at home making cookies during the day, she was paving ways and fighting for the mentally ill. And, she sort of taught me about the glass ceiling. Like, she was really a pioneer. And she would have been, if she's still alive, she would have been 92, I think, right now, or 93. My dad is still alive at 99. And, so she was in medical school. I think there was 3 women in her medical school class. So it was very rare back then. And, she always instilled in me that you deserve what you want and you should go after it. And then my father is the one that really taught me to appreciate the finer things in life. Like, he loved, going out to more elegant meals. While my mom liked it, it wasn't as much of a thing. And my dad and I really bonded over this. So
you learned to eat well too.
Yes.
I learned this from my father too, especially a Jewish family. I suppose it's probably the same if it's Italian and Greek. It's really funny.
Yeah. So and then I almost died when I was 2.5 of meningitis. And, both of my parents were physicians. And so, it was very scary. And fortunately they were connected at the hospital, Stanford, where they worked. And I got in and they figured out what was wrong because I couldn't speak, and they were able to obviously cure me. Here I am today. But I think they say that kind of formed me as a person. And it also made me a little more spoiled than my siblings, because I think I was showered with a lot of things because they were so grateful that I survived and that I was around. So,
did they say why they thought that it helped shape you as a person?
I think, they built me a playhouse with running water in our backyard. I had a little house that I could cook in, and I had so many stuffed animals. Everyone was bringing me things, and I just was showered with so much love. Not that I wasn't loved as much before I had meningitis, but I don't know. I think that experience bonded me even closer with my parents, because I think they were really concerned that they were going to lose me.
Yeah. Obviously, parents love their kids, but yeah, if they almost lose a kid, that's, they had to have even more gratitude and gratefulness. So what did you do as you started heading into high school, where you're really starting to do your own thing? Was there anything connected to the event industry or design at that time, or even with food?
Well, interesting you ask. So I grew up in, a pretty big family, I guess. 4 kids, it's not huge, but, there was a lot of us kids. And as we got older, my parents would leave and somebody might be staying with us, but, there wasn't a ton of supervision. And of course I was very responsible, but there were one or two occasions where as a senior in high school, I hosted.
Are we going to say parties at the house when they were gone? I'm okay.
Very epic parties. Yeah. I would cook I would grill and I would have filet mignon roasts and all this incredible food. And I got a Heineken keg. I didn't go I go big. So I was known at that point as the person in the school that had the really good parties, dance parties. And
we were talking more than one. Okay.
Yeah, I had probably two. And then, so it did start early. I wasn't a bad kid. I wasn't crazy wild, but I did have these parties, so I guess I wasn't perfect.
So did you go to college?
Yeah, so I took 2 years off after high school because I really didn't know where I wanted to go, and I just didn't want to go until I had a passion for something. And I ended up visiting one of my friends who was at Pepperdine in Malibu, and I visited her and they had a program in communications and advertising. And I thought at the time I wanted to do that. And I really loved Malibu and it seemed like a perfectly lovely place to go to college and go to the beach. So,
oh yeah, I've passed Pepperdine many a time. It has quite the view.
Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah. So I packed up and went to Pepperdine and I graduated with a degree in advertising and communications with a minor in business administration. So it was a really good 4 years, and my party planning kind of was on hold during college, but I picked it back up when I moved home and friends got married. And I'm just one of these extreme, hopeless, romantic people, and I love weddings. And every wedding that my parents, because they were older than the typical parent, because my dad waited quite a while to get married, I would say, is there any way I could go? I promise I'll just sit there, but I just love weddings. I would love to go. So they would let me come. And now I'm horrified because it's not nice to invite your
right,
children.
Your kid.
But it truly formed me. And I was super well behaved. I would just sit there with my eyes big and staring at the bride. And I just love the idea of all the beautiful things and the flowers and the bride and love and commitment and all of that. So,
oh, you are real romantic. Well, so what happened then when you left college and all? I mean, were you first trying to get a job in advertising? What was going on at that time?
I realized when I graduated, yes, it was real cutthroat, and I decided that I probably wanted to be a buyer in the department stores. And after doing some research around that, and I had some connections, I decided that really wasn't what I thought it was in the reality. So then in the meantime, I had a job at Neiman Marcus, and I was the assistant manager of their Epicurean department, which is their gourmet food department. And it opened up in Palo Alto, and it was on the ground level, and it was a pretty big deal. It was the first time they had their Epicure department on the ground level. And that was fun, but it wasn't truly what I felt like was my career. And I ended up deciding that I wanted to do events for a company. And so I thought I could work in marketing communications for a biotech or a tech company and do their trade shows and do their company parties. And that sounded exciting to me. So I ended up getting a job, a biotech company called Collagen Corporation, which was more for plastic surgeons and dermatologists. They would inject this collagen into ladies' faces mostly to fill in the wrinkles. And so I worked in marketing there, and I worked my way up, and then I jumped to another tech company a bigger one called Syntex, and I worked in their international marketing. And then I ended up working my way up to a product marketing manager. And so luckily, in the second or third round of layoffs, I can't remember, but I do remember it was the last really favorable round of layoffs. I was laid off because I was the junior product manager in this team, and they figured they needed to keep the more senior people that actually had a bigger science background. So I was like so excited. I felt really bad because there were people.
Wait, you were excited that you got laid off, or?
Oh, yes, I was.
Okay, so it freed you.
It freed me. It was like the gift. It's like, it's one of these pivotal moments where, like, because they paid me for a year.
Oh, they gave you severance. Okay. That's a lot of severance.
Yeah, that's a lot of severance. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. You know, I used to be at IBM and they paid an enormous amount of money for me to go to Lexmark. And I knew already that I was going to be going into music full time. So when they made that offer, because Lexmark wasn't quite, didn't have the brand recognition of IBM. And so they were paying us all a lot of money because they wanted to, it was a division of IBM that was going to split off and be its own company. I was like, yes, it's like, so I could relate. So when you get that, do you then think, had you already been thinking of starting your own company? Like, what did you do next to get there?
Yeah, so I was laid off and I went home and I was thrilled and I decided I would celebrate that night and I would start my business plan the next morning. So I realized, back then there were very few wedding planners in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I didn't have a lot of competition, which was obviously great. Most people, including my parents and family members, knew nothing of wedding planning. They knew of catering. So I basically had to convince and sell them on this idea and that I knew I could make something of myself in the year. It's basically a way to sort of fund my business. They also gave me incredible medical benefits for a year and a half. So I just went for it and I had a marketing degree. So I knew in order to do this and to be happy, I would need to be in the high-end luxury market because I like to do things well and I care a lot about the execution and the service. And I knew that I needed clientele with money that would allow me to execute on that level. Otherwise, I would just kill myself.
But this is interesting to me that you're looking to kind of jump right in at the high level, whereas most of us, have to kind of work our way up. And you're saying you just wanted to go right there. Like that was the sweet spot for you. And how am I going to break into that level? Like, how do you jump right to it? How'd you make that happen?
That's a great question. So, at the beginning, I didn't have obviously a lot of business or relationships. So I decided that I would create my collateral material, my business card, my marketing material. And then I created a list after doing research and talking to enough people to know like who I wanted to meet and sort of what I felt their status was in the luxury market. And the top of the luxury market was Paula LeDuc Fine Catering.
Yep. She was on the show, by the way. Crazy story. Amazing story. But yeah, so she's big time. So go ahead. So you recognize that Paula LeDuc is doing it.
Yeah. And the thing that was so cool about her is she wasn't cookie cutter and she was a groundbreaker and she was paving the way and she cared about amazing food and service. And she also did weddings in interesting places, not just in hotel ballrooms. So I found all of that amazing and inspiring. So I kind of each week, early in the week, I learned that you don't want to cold call wedding industry folk at the end of the week because that means they're getting close to their weekend and they're frantic. So Monday and Tuesdays, I had a list and each week, I would try to at least schedule a meeting with one or two people. But
can we break that down for a moment, Laurie? Reaching out to somebody of that level when you haven't yet done it, you're trying to break into it is it's a courageous act and it takes a lot of courage. What technically do you say? Like, what is it? Do you recall how it is that you got their attention to actually schedule an appointment? Like, that's a big first step.
I just said I'm starting a full-time wedding planning business and I left my career in marketing in the biotech industry and I have a lot of passion for this industry and I'm really excited to put everything I have into it. And if I could take them out to lunch or schedule bring them for coffee or something, I would really appreciate just a few minutes of their time so I could find out about their business and just introduce them and see what I could learn. And then after I left them, I would shake their hand. And then I would follow up with a mailing, and I mailed them I had this whole presentation, and they were like, and I had a calligrapher address them, and they were like really impressed that I was.
What was the presentation? Again, sorry to cut you off. These are so important moments to me. Is that, first of all, I want to recognize this. I think it's wonderful that instead of, they say fake it till you make it, you were being really honest with these people. And I believe when people come up to me, and I used to do this too, the same thing, if you're really honest and you're showing your passion, people, it's contagious. They feel it. They want to be near you. And I think they want to give. So I think that the fact that you would say that to these people, be right out there with it. I want to do this. I'm new. I love it. You give that to them. I think that's really important. But then when you send them the presentation, and I also love that you're doing some kind of follow-up immediately, what is in that presentation that they liked so much?
I created this, I'd call it a brochure, but it was, for me, it was on really beautiful handmade paper, and I put it together with really beautiful ribbon, and it was styled. It wasn't like a digitally printed it felt very beautiful, and it also coordinated with my engraved, it looked like kind of cranes engraved business card, and I had like a Cattleya orchid, which back then in doing my research, it's like this beautiful white, super elaborate, big orchid. Ironically, I don't really like orchids at weddings, but it was like the expensive, beautiful, and I blind embossed it on the business card. So that was my logo. And then I did all of that. So I had this beautiful, expensive card and with my brochure. And then I wrote a handwritten note that I had on engraved stationery that all matched. And I had a pretty envelope. And then I had a calligrapher address it. And people told me that they enjoyed meeting me, but the follow-up and what I presented to them showed them that I was bringing this to a new level, and that it wasn't just, a mom who was bored and wanted to do this part-time. I mean, I was ready to make this my career, and I needed to prove to my family and to myself that I could live off of the salary that I made. Another really pivotal point, which you're going to love, I think, is that I had a degree in marketing, and I met this florist in some sort of like mixer, which I don't really like going to, but I went back then to a few just because I wanted to meet people. And she was really nice, and she lived close to me, and her business was called An Occasional Arrangement. And, if you think about it, that goes with flowers, and that also goes with planning, right? Because it kind of an arrangement, you arrange events. So I told her she had really not very beautiful or refined or special business cards and logo. And I said, Laurie, her name was Laurie too. I'll sit with you. I'm totally happy to help you design something that will better sort of sell your brand and flower business to more brides or whatever. So she's like, oh my gosh, that would be amazing. So I sit with her and I help her redo her branding. And because I wasn't that busy then, and I was happy to do it. Anyway, she gets a call from the Yellow Pages. I'd never advertised in the Yellow Pages, from a secretary.
And if people don't know what that is,
right?
You know what I'm saying? Listen, I'm a little older too. Yellow Pages was this, like the phone book, right? It was the business section of a very thick paper book, like an encyclopedia. It's so funny we have to describe this, of names and phone numbers, but we lived and died by these phone books. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there was also that, or you dial 411 or whatever for the number, but it's a way to like look up, and they had sections, event planning or whatever. So Microsoft Corporation had a new office in the Bay Area, and the secretary of the vice president of marketing or sales and marketing called this florist thinking that she was an event planner because her boss was hosting a family reunion at their new home in a town called Atherton, which is a lovely, affluent town not far from where I grew up and not far from where I was living. So she gave the secretary, she says, I'm not a party planner, but I know a great party planner. Let me give you the name of Laurie Arons. She's great and she'll help you. So I competed against a couple, but I ended up impressing the guy's mom and the guy. And so somehow I convinced him to hire me to do this. And then, that was great. And there was no Google and there was no way I could see who they were or whatever. So I'm like proceeding to plan this party over the course of a year. And he's got like 12 brothers and sisters. They're from the Midwest, and their house was being finished. It was just new construction. And we were chugging along with that. And then I get a call from him in the middle of this, and I hadn't executed that event yet. And he says, Laurie, I've got an emergency. And I'm like, okay, what's the emergency? He said, come to my office. I need to meet with you. So then I go to the office and I meet with him, and he's like, I've got the situation and it's very urgent, and I think you may be able to help me. He's like, I'm traveling to China on this trip with some friends, and it's an amazing trip. And one of the evenings, in order to pay back the host of this trip, we've got to educate the group on something having to do with China. So it's a way for us when we're traveling through to sort of have a fun way to learn something that's meaningful. And he goes, I made this movie and I just saw it, and I don't like it. I can't do this. Like, this isn't working. So I've thought about doing this game, kind of like Concentration or one of these old games, and compete, and I thought doing it on ancient Chinese inventions could be really cool. So come up with like cards and this is, ancient fireworks. They could have started anywhere, and the group competed. And so I made this whole visual thing, and I stayed up and I didn't sleep for like 4 days, literally. Like, I did all the research, and I had to make this good, because at the end of the meeting, I said, can you tell me who these people are that are going on this trip? He said, I think there's like 6 couples or 7 couples at the most. And I said, so I can get a sense of their humor or anything. And he said, well, Laurie, one of them is Bill and Melinda Gates, and the other is Susie and Warren Buffett. And I'm like, God. Oh my God.
I hope you did some somersaults.
I tried to play it really cool. I kind of giggled. And so I went home, and I'm like, I've got to kick this out of the park. I've got to impress him and them, and, I'm going to do everything in my power. So even though I'd honestly never made a game or anything like that, I knew I could, so I did it. And I waited, and they left, and, it was all over the news. And I then found out that he was Bill Gates' best man at his wedding, the guy, my client. So I wait to hear from him when he gets home. And, I'm just dying. I'm like, oh God, I hope they love this game. I hope it was a success. And he calls me and tells me, not only was it a success, it was the favorite and the most fun of all of the entertainment. Of the educational entertainment. So I'm just like, that's a miracle. I don't know how I did that, but I did. And then they hired me to do the reunion for that trip. So then I got to meet everyone and do this whole thing with the group. And then the buzz got out in the industry that I was doing events with these people.
With Zola, as wedding pros, we have nothing to lose and everything to gain. List your business for free and get pre-vetted leads from the site with one of the fastest growing communities of engaged couples. Zola does things differently and believes in empowering you to get more control of your business. With no required subscription, transparent pricing, and a pay-to-connect model, Zola lets you choose when and how you pay for leads. Get the flexibility you need to succeed and focus on what really matters, growing your business and serving your couples. Join Zola today and experience the difference for yourself. To create your free listing and get your first few connections for free as well, go to zola.com/Andy. That's ZOLA.com/Andy. If we could skip, Laurie, to now, basically, it'd be interesting to me to hear something about what your process is like. Because you do mostly weddings, is that right? Did you say that earlier?
Yes, I do. I would say probably 85-90% weddings and the rest social. I don't do corporate. So when I get inquiries, I contact every bride by myself. Yeah. And I schedule a call with them, and I don't send them a questionnaire and ask them, how much budget they have and how many people and, all of these things that I think if I were inquiring with a wedding planner, I would not want to be asked.
So you just make the appointment basically first. You schedule an appointment, period.
Yeah. I want to talk to them because you have no idea who's on the other end. And, you Google people now, and it's helpful to at least know a little bit about who they are. But I always, you never can assume anything. And so I want to talk to them and I want to hear their story before I start talking and before I start selling them. So I just say, it's really nice to meet you and, so excited for your engagement. I'd really love to hear the beginning of this call, like anything and everything at this point about your wedding.
Can I ask a technical question though, Laurie? Sorry to cut you off, but, I'm just thinking right now that the fact that you're doing this, I think it's wonderful. And obviously it's so much easier for people to get to know who you are, your personality, get a sense of trust, all that stuff by you being on the line, not doing a questionnaire. I get it. But, aren't there a lot of times, do you sometimes spend a lot of time only to find out they don't have the budget for whatever your range is that you deal with in your company? Isn't that something, it's such an awkward thing, but otherwise I would think you're spending, and again, I understand connecting with people. That's my main thing in my own music business is connecting with people, but you could go on for quite a while to find out that there's not even a chance financially. And not that it's only about that, but we all have our minimums that we need to make. How do you assess that quickly? Or are you taking the risk and potentially a lot of your time to only find out that it's not the right match, even financially speaking?
Yes. So I would say my skills are honed over so many years. I do think that there are a lot of people that have false sort of information out that a wedding could be, with this day and age, $50,000 or $100,000, and that's a good budget because they just don't know. And they might have so much money and they could really spend whatever. And if you ask them, what they want to spend without sort of getting to know them and hearing kind of what they want, like you could be, I think, closing out a lot of really good people. And a lot of my favorite weddings and clients were people potentially that didn't know and didn't realize at the beginning what it costs, but the way I work is very transparent. And so, fast forward to now and I'm talking to them and I'm hearing little hints along the way, like our budget this, or we couldn't do that because of our budget and all this budget. And if it's like the word budget comes up too many times and I can sense that and then I'm like really nice and I tell them, and I've always told them that I couldn't afford myself and, it's crazy expensive, and I try to help them. And it's also an opportunity for me to refer them to somebody that I think is good, that's a lot less expensive, that would help them. And they always appreciate that. And I think good going around in circles is always a really good thing.
Yeah. And I suppose there must be other, I'm assuming, ways to, if you do ask early, where are you thinking of getting married? And they say something like, Cannes or, something like that destination wedding in Morocco, or we want to go to, XYZ hotel. Obviously that gives you a sense. So, right. I imagine you have kind of different ways in a gentle way to get hints.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So the Yellow Pages was one story that was, I think, pivotal. And then another story was this bride, and it was back when I wasn't, as busy, and she happened to reach me on a day that it wasn't an intense day in my life. And so this was back in, I think, 2005, and she was getting married, and unfortunately, the reality of her budget was not in the same reality of our weddings. But, I listened to her and I gave her advice. Like I give people advice, like I steer them to venues. I talk them through things. Like I'm happy. I'm an open book. Like I'm happy to help people because I do believe good goes around. So this one bride, I spent quite a bit of time with her that day. We just got along, and I was able to answer a lot of questions and guide her in different areas and help her. And she was so nice and so appreciative. And she says, Laurie, one day, I'm going to refer you to my boss. And, I can't tell you how much I appreciate everything that you've done for me. And I'm like, oh, it's no problem. I'm totally happy to do it. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. And
I'm on the edge of my seat to hear who the boss was.
So then a year later, the year that I got married, I get a call from her boss, and they were, I don't want to say his name, but he...
Oh, come on. Hey, listen, it's just us, Laurie, just the two of us.
His name wouldn't be well known, but his company that he started in the Bay Area is huge. And, he was extremely successful, and it was his second wedding. And so they were having a 4-day wedding in Hana, Maui, at Hotel Hana, Maui. And then they were coming back, and 2 weeks later having a wedding. They wanted to have a wedding in LA. And so we ended up doing it at Dick Clark's estate in Malibu. And then I got married the next week after that Malibu party.
Oh, gosh, I can't imagine you're dealing with that right up until your wedding.
Yeah, so I added it. This was all in a few months, like probably 4 months. I did all those events and things on top of everything. And, that was a really good client. And they continue to be lovely people. And and really wonderful friends of my company. And it all came from being nice to that bride.
It's interesting to me. I mean, you're definitely obviously doing something that people can really connect with. Like I'm thinking even, in terms of social media in your business, you have last time I looked, over 43,000 Instagram followers. So, to look at your work in that way is obviously, giving a big message out there. How do you think you even built that? That's an enviable number.
Well, that's a great question. I am very grateful to my friend, Jose Villa, who, I met him, now I can't remember what year it was, but the first wedding that we worked on together, or the second, he showed me Instagram, and I'm like, what's this about? And we were at dinner at the wedding, and we have like 10 or 15 minutes to eat. And he's like on Instagram, and I'm like, he goes, you've got to do it. And I'm like, oh, I'm like, really? He's like, yes, you've got to do it. And I'm like, okay. And through the course of that night, he put me on Instagram. And so my first posts are from that night. And I feel lucky that I started when I did, because it was easier to grow followers then. And also he was my kind of mentor on Instagram. So whenever I had questions or I'd follow along, and he would text me and say, that photo's blurry, take away that photo. He kind of taught me the ropes, and what better person to teach you the ropes. And
are there any particular tips that you remember from Jose? I mean, and he was on the show too, great guy. Just incredible photographer. Do you remember some of the tips he gave you when he was mentoring you about this? I mean, I understand this is too blurry. So I can understand that he's teaching you that you can't just put out any image, right? You got to be really particular. It's got to be quality.
Right. And he said, what you want to do, and especially because using it for business, which of course was my main motivation for being on it, was, you have a second for people, if they see you tagged somewhere, they'll click over to your Instagram gallery, and you've got those 9 images. And if those 9 images are well curated and they look beautiful together, and they're going to show people how you care about detail, and also show off a lot of the events that we do. Obviously, that's what I post. I don't post any other people's work, or I don't repost other things. I only show my weddings, so they get to know you. I think that was a really big one. And also just being very generous and crediting and tagging people in your posts will come to pay off. So there are a lot of planners that don't tag the vendors that they work with because they want to keep them somewhat secret, or their little secret weapon. But I've not done that. And I feel really good about tagging the vendors that have worked so hard for me. And I do push my vendors, outside of the box more than most. And I want perfection, as much as possible. And so they work hard for me and they get great joy in what they create. And I also want them to get the benefits. So crediting them and the people is, I think, really important. And to go in and to comment on other people, he told me too, to build your followers, you need to follow industry leaders and you need to have an interactive two-way tool.
See, now that's real important. You just caught something for me. I'm learning more and more about social media. And, a lot of times I'll like stuff and I'm realizing even right now, I should probably do more comment. I'm thinking to myself, okay, why do I like this? And say it, right? I mean, isn't that just step one? Instead of just liking, what is it that you like about this particular image? I'm learning something right now, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really because it'll make people in the end, notice you if they've got the time or the bandwidth to explore that. And I think he also said, and I believe this, is that you need to be your own Instagram. Every Instagram post is mine and it's me.
Wait, I'm not sure if I follow that, Laurie. What do you mean by that?
I mean, there are companies that make...
Oh, I see. You mean where you're in there yourself?
Yeah, it's I'm the one posting my Instagram. It's me, 100%. I don't have a company doing it or any staff doing it. It's me, and I think people feel the authenticity of it, and I get a lot of brides that have followed me before they got engaged, and they're ready to sign me up just because they feel, I think, they trust me and they know me a little bit, and they obviously are somehow identifying with my work.
See, this is a good point. Maybe some people would think, or I guess I'm thinking, if it's a company, there must be ways they can do it where it seems like it is the person who hired them. But yeah, I'll bet over a period of time that people can sense, is this really them? I like that. And you're expressing your personality the way you do it too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a lot of fun. It is very time consuming. I spend a lot of time on it, but I really love it.
How much time do you think you spend? You have any rough idea?
I probably spend, 2 hours a day.
Wow. Well, there you have it right there. A couple hours a day. Jeez.
Hopefully less, but it depends. I go on and off because it's on my phone. So I click on and I look and I go back, and yeah, I'm inspired I follow different designers and different people in different industries that inspire me, visually. And it's definitely, I get a lot out of it, for my own creativity. And my business gets a lot out of it by what I put in. It comes back to me.
How do you feel about other platforms, social media, like Facebook, for instance? Do you make much use of that?
I used it more before. I find Facebook, I think it's good to have a presence on there, but I'm not on there very much. It's too political, and I don't know. I just found it to be more annoying. And I don't really like Twitter either. I
was going to ask, it seems like in the wedding industry, and I think probably the entire event industry, that Twitter just doesn't have a strong presence, with us. Although some will use it, but not generally, right?
Correct. It's not visual. And I think the most amazing thing about Instagram is it's really showing the world where you are, who you are, what you love through a visual tool that's so easy. It's the phone on the camera is so amazing, and, it's really, really fun.
So what is the best way for people to find out more about you and also more information about the Wedding Planner Masterclass and
okay.
Yeah, and all of that?
Okay, so I was lucky to be invited by Jose. He does these photography workshops that he's very famous for, and a lot of very successful photographers have taken his intensive workshop and have honed their skills to be, better and more competitive wedding photographers. So I was lucky to be sort of the wedding planner / designer for 4 of his workshops. So they're 4-day intensive workshops. So I, worked with the floral designer and Jose and the person designing the paper goods, and we like created these styled shoots and these dinners that were photographed by Jose and all the students. And I got to be there and like immerse myself in this. And it was very inspiring. And I'd leave refreshed, exhausted, but just like, it just not my normal day to day. And then after doing it for a while, several of them, I'm like, people would say, you need to help wedding planners. Like wedding planners, unfortunately, a lot of them get into it because they think it's about the pretty picture and the design, but they don't really appreciate or really respect or understand the logistics and the production side of it, which isn't as romantic or it isn't as fun, but it's definitely a puzzle and it's challenging. And, you know, if you've got the right personality, it's a great, career, but there's more to wedding planning than just making it pretty. I mean, there's florists that make it pretty as well. And like, you have to create a team, but they told me that, my company really elevated that process and we took care of our clients and also the vendors, and we made sure the communication was clear so that in the end, when all of these things come together and they merge, you create this incredible once in a lifetime day. So they convinced at one of those, we were talking, I said, well, maybe I should do one of these for wedding planners. Like, there's nothing like this for wedding planners. And I'm like, but I'd want to do it at a 5-star resort. Jose's were typically more at a 4-star, 3.5-star, a beautiful, inspiring place, but not as fancy. But I'm like, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it. My brand is a luxury brand, and I want the wedding planners and the people to come and to immerse in that environment, and also, have the experience of having me be an open book and going through all of my sort of tricks and process and history and stories and lessons I've learned and how I go about doing a timeline and how I go about interviewing a client and how I price and why I price that way. And we get into these like conversations, and then I invite a catering expert, Paula LeDuc herself is going to be a speaker this year. Jose will be there with his husband, Joel, photographing. Jess Levin Conroy of Carrots and Cake is a speaker, and she's been at every one, and she's an amazing, inspiring speaker and industry leader. And this year I have Abby Larson and Tate Larson, the founders of Style Me Pretty. And so that we all hang out together. Like, we're in classroom together, we're talking, we're brainstorming, we're having lunch together, we're having breakfast together, we're having one-on-ones, we're creating these shoots, and Jose's showing them why it's important to set up, a ceremony with this location. So it's very hands-on, and it's just a way to sort of be around your peers, but also in a small enough and non-intimidating way, because we're all there. Like, they can hang out with Jose Villa for 4 days,
See, that's the best. When you make them accessible to people, that is such, to me, if and when I go to these kinds of conferences, that is one of my favorite parts of it, is that you can do that. And it's not to bug them and stuff like that. It's to have real conversations and get to see who they really are and get information you're not going to get when they're up on a microphone.
Right, exactly. So I wanted it to be really intimate, and I want them to feel in the end that they get enough time with all of us, because it's expensive just because of the hotels, and the venues are very expensive. And then, I'm setting up like this custom structure that's like crazy for this one at Ventana. And like, we bring in the most beautiful florals and models and incredible gowns and gifts. And I just want them to like just take it all in and be sort of a guest at one of these, but also just, we're all open books so that they can hopefully get some clarity on things, and we review their portfolios and try to help them and their Instagrams. And, it's very inspiring, and it's very fun to be my own customer and not have anyone else to tell me what to do. It's a little different, of course. I mean, I love listening to my clients, and proud of how I listen and get to know them and deliver on, something that they're going to be really in love with versus just me. But at the masterclass, I'm the one I have to please myself and I have to be inspiring. So it's exciting and fun.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So what is a good one place for people to find you?
On my website, it's my name, lauriearons.com. And there's a section on there for masterclass. And I do have each year the different photos from the photographer. So you can get, at this point, this will be my fourth one, quite a bit of history of the kinds of things we create. And, and I'm proud to say that most of the attendees, I stay in touch with. I'm there for them. If they have a challenging client, if they, want to know my thought on something, I'm mentoring them. They come work at a wedding on my team after they graduate. So I try to help, and it warms my heart and makes me feel like a better person for giving back to an industry that has really done so much to fulfill me.
Okay, great. Well, it has been such a pleasure to have you on the show, Laurie. I really appreciate it. And, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you so much, Andy. It was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to my conversation with Laurie Arons. Be sure to check out her website, which is lauriearons.com. You can find her on social media on Instagram at Laurie Arons and on Facebook at Laurie Arons Special Events. And I want to thank our sponsor again, Zola. Remember to go to zola.com/Andy to create your free listing and get your first few connections for free. And next week's guest is going to be a new conversation with PR expert Megan Ely. And be sure to subscribe to The Wedding Biz so you know when new episodes come out. And would also love if you can review the show. That helps new people to find the show and makes me very happy. You can follow us on Instagram at The Wedding Biz, and we'll catch you next week.